All right, so we're going to take a step back from Romans for this week, and we're going to have a little bit different focus. It probably, I'm sure, is not a surprise that Tuesday is a big day in the country. There's all kinds of things going on. There's reasons that we need to be serious about that and take that serious. I have said that many times. I can't remember how many years I've been a pastor, but you add that up and you multiply it by 50. That's a lot of sermons. So I have said that many times, that it is important that the church, that Christians, that we take our role in our culture seriously. And the way that we interact with our government is that we can go vote. That's a wonderful thing, and it's a privilege, and we need to do that. I've never gotten real specific about it. And today I'm going to get a little bit more specific than I have in the past. And it really, it's kind of summing up what we've been talking about for over a year. So we're gonna be moving quick, to say the least. But we started off this year talking about a spiritual battle and spiritual warfare. What that looks like. We've been delving into that, right? We've been talking about different strongholds that pull us away from God, that we're seeing within our culture. That there are some just ugly strongholds that are out there, and I want to read again the passage in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 12. Very short. It says, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." All right. So we've been talking about that. Today, I want to try to be as specific as I can, because it's easy to talk about a spiritual battle in a spiritual sense. Right? And, there's good and evil out there, and you're tempted, and all of these things. But how does it manifest in reality? Because we live in a real world, a physical world, one that we can touch, one that we can engage in, right? One that has impact on us. So how does this spiritual battle, how does it manifest practically? And this verse actually shows us. Now, usually what we focus on in the church is how the spiritual battle impacts you and your family, right? That you need to be battling and making sure that you are choosing to walk the right direction, to do what God calls, to recognize when you're experiencing spiritual things that are happening to you as an individual in your family. We usually don't spend a whole lot of time talking about, well, wait, if the spiritual battle happens within the family, why wouldn't it happen on a broader scale? And in fact, where on the broader scale is way more effective at bringing destruction and chaos. And this verse is very interesting there in verse 12. "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood." So sometimes we kind of just stop there, because then the last part, it talks about the spiritual things. So okay, so this is all about battling spiritual things. It says, "But against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of" what dark world? This dark world. Right? And, right, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. All right, so it's recognizing there is a practical significance to spiritual warfare. And where does it manifest the most throughout history? It manifests within ideologies, within systems, within the rulers and the authorities. This does not mean that people who are in authority are demons. Right? This means that the rulers and the authorities are the ones that are most susceptible to spiritual battle and to spiritual warfare and to adopting ideologies that are evil, because whenever the leaders and those ideologies are corrupted, it impacts not just one family, it impacts society as a whole. So of course, Satan would want to attack the things that can impact and destroy societies, right? God knew this from the beginning. Whenever he was speaking with Moses, he told him how to set up a way to govern the people. Guess what? It wasn't. It wasn't an authoritarian model. It really wasn't even a theocracy. Not the way that we view theocracy today. It was, yes, the people need to be united in their belief and their following God. But Moses said, go break up into people groups, select leaders. Those leaders will handle some little problems. As it gets bigger, it eventually gets to Moses. But he was not the ruler. It basically was a representative form of government there for the people. And when did things start going bad with the people? Whenever they said, you know what, we don't want to be like this. We want to be like other nations, and we want a king. Right? Where can the spiritual forces do the most damage? Whenever you give power to a human individual who can start impacting society. Now, sometimes it can work okay. Maybe that individual is really godly and really good. Wonderful. But guess what? He's not going to live forever. And that's what happened to the people. And it started to disintegrate their society. Fast forward 3,000 or so years. Most governments and systems from the time of Moses and the people, and especially once they went to an authoritarian, that's what it stayed. It stayed in that mode. And there'd be countries that did okay, and then they'd fall apart, all of that, but it was very authoritarian. It was an evil ideology because it didn't care about people. It cared about power, which is the natural state of a governmental system, right? Because we live in a fallen, flawed world. And that's what's going to happen. Our founders come along, the 1700s. They recognize this. They have a biblical foundation to them. Were they all Christians? Not the way that we may think. Are we going to see all of them in heaven? Probably not. But they had a foundational understanding of the world that they saw through the lens of the Bible. The book of Deuteronomy was used by them more than any other source. Right? So they understood this. They understood that if you're setting up a government, rather than the power being with the rulers and the authorities, as Ephesians talks about, the power needs to be with the people because individual liberty is most important. And then they also knew the risk of this. Just as God knew the risk of giving you freedom to choose to follow him or choose to be a jerk. He gave us freedom to do that, right? That's undeniable. I don't care what your theology is. In some way, God gave you the freedom to either follow him or to reject him. The founders, they understood that was the reality. They said it was worth the risk to give people individual liberty. And that came from their understanding of the Bible. And they recognized the danger of that because they knew all people struggle. But they knew the danger was there is more evil comes whenever there is power in the authorities over the people rather than the people holding the authorities accountable. That's what needed to happen. That creates the best scenario. Perfect scenario? No. Best scenario, yes. So our country has gone through all kinds of ups and downs, as every country has. It has changed our world. This was the first country to elevate individual liberty. And it's led to more freedom throughout the world than there's ever been. That's starting to contract a little bit. It also led to more abundance within individuals and more freedom to the individuals, the capacity to earn, the capacity to fulfill your life passions and dreams. It gave that opportunity that had never been there before. Was it perfect? No. Did everyone get to have the same benefits? No. But it's moving in that direction because individual liberty had always been elevated above the power of the government. Because the founders knew that in the power of the government is where Satan is going to attack. And if he can elevate the power of the government above the individuals, then that is going to destroy individuals, it's going to destroy families, and it's going to destroy societies. And so you have to, as individuals, recognize that and push back against it. And our country did that for years and years and years, not in perfect ways. We could go through deep history. We don't have time unless you're good to be here till 10 o'clock tonight, and I am not. I have more pig pens to build. I have to have some levity or I will curse. What has happened? Over the last about 100 years, since World War II, let's dumb this down a little bit. We basically have kind of two ways of thought that we have labeled liberal and conservative. Right? They've kind of meshed with each with a respective party. And you know what? For a long time, that was just fine. Because liberal and conservative really weren't that different. Because both of them recognized the importance of individual liberty and freedom. They had different ideas of how much the government should be involved, but both of them didn't want the government very involved. Right? It was kind of like if you go back in time to the small little town and has a Methodist church on one end of town and a Baptist church on the other end of town. And you know what? There will be times they just gripe about each other's theology. Can you believe those people only sprinkle on the top of the head? How ridiculous is that? And then the other, can you believe they waste all that water by dunking someone in it and then just draining the whole thing? Right? Just all of these little bickering back and forth. But you know what? If something bad happened in the town, you know who was standing right side by side working to do the right thing? It was the Baptist and the Methodist. And you know what we've realized now? You don't hear that much anymore because we recognize, oh, you know what? We agree on nearly everything. Why are we even messing with arguing about some of these small stuff? That's where, and you can believe it or not, but it was where your traditional, classical, liberal, and conservative held way more in common than they held different. Because both of them pushed back against authoritarianism. Both of them recognized that evil is seen as the more powerful a government gets. So you want to push back against that. Both recognized that. But something started to change. And we've seen this throughout history because Satan's ideology is he wants to make the individual as small and weak and insignificant as he can, because that brings about the most death and destruction. And that is his goal. And we've seen it throughout history. You see how it infiltrates dictatorships, how it infiltrates monarchies and creates feudal systems. All of those things are not godly. And so that view, which now we would call leftism, that kind of flows from Marxism, you know, all of these isms, right? And that can get really heady and really intellectual and all this stuff. but it's pretty simple. The left believes in a more authoritarian state, believes that the individual is less than. Right? That view has now been infiltrating our society from the beginning, by the way, and it infiltrates other societies, and it can hit from any direction. It can hit conservative, it can hit liberal. It's attacking all the time. But our system from the beginning was set up to push back against that. Right? Now, we have allowed it to infiltrate more than ever before. And it has infiltrated, the place that it has been able to gain a foothold is on the liberal side. In fact, it has completely hijacked classical, traditional, liberal thought. There is nothing comparable between a classical liberal from the 1960s and a leftist today. Nothing. And now we're in this place where a lot of people don't recognize it, because now we just use the term liberal as a synonym for leftist, and it is not. And we have to, as a people, rise up against that to stop that from happening. But it's really hard. I understand that. But it is vital that we do. But we also need to understand a little bit of those cornerstones of what the left is all about. And, you could go on forever to do this, but I'm making my case because I have never preached a sermon like this. I am telling you, I believe that the left has infiltrated the liberal, and there are many liberals who don't recognize it and are still supporting that. And I believe that the leftist ideology will destroy our country. And if you continue to support that, even if you're deceived, which that's what most people are, because guess what? We're in a spiritual battle. What does Scripture talk about in spiritual battles? That people will be deceived. That's where we are. That's why the sermon has to change a little bit. Here are the cornerstones of the left that are different than conservative and liberal. And this comes straight from Marx and his writings. The goal of that, they looked at society around them and they said, man, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of people that are mistreated. A lot of people who don't have the same amount of stuff as other people. We can create a utopia if we just get all the systems right. And what that view leads to is, what are the systems that you can use? It's human systems. It's government. If you're going to make a utopia where everyone is the same, everyone is equitable, so everyone has the same comfort level in their houses, all of that stuff, right? How is the only way you can do that? It is through governmental systems. Those are the only earthly things that have the power to do that. The left does believe in a man-made utopia. This flies in the face of everything in this book. And by the way, Karl Marx knew that. That's why he said, you've got to get rid of Scripture. You've got to get rid of faith. Because the Bible teaches that there is not going to be a utopia, that everything is not going to be perfect. In this world, you will have trouble. Jesus said, you can feed the poor and you should take care of the poor, but the poor will always be with you. In Deuteronomy, it says, do not show favoritism to the rich or to the poor, right? Because that is a reality of life. We are in a fallen world. God teaches us that we are fallen because of sin, and that brings suffering, and we need to help those who are suffering, but we cannot fix it. We can make it better, and we can sure as hell make it worse. And when you think that you can create a man-made utopia, you will make it worse. That is leftist thought. We've seen this rising up. We see now, we don't talk about equality as much as equity, right? We want to create, liberals, conservatives wanted to create a system that was based on equality, where everyone had an equal chance. And we recognize that's really hard to do. But that means you view everyone as individuals and you give them an opportunity. Equity means we're going to make everyone come to the same outcome. That is what it means. That is impossible, right? It is impossible, and it leads to destruction. Great example. Over the last couple years, I don't know, you've probably heard about the way that we've handled COVID. There was an idea within our government that we wanted to eliminate COVID, to have zero COVID. Right? These were stated policies in different places around the world. Not to let's mitigate, not to do any of this. It was zero COVID. Man-made utopia, right? Oh, we have this really dangerous disease. We need to eliminate it because we don't want anyone to suffer, right? Because we care about you. So how did governments go about doing that? Mandates, forcing you to do things, taking away your individual liberties. And it made it much worse. Our media is given, by the way, our media is given over to leftists. Used to, the media was more liberal. And so they would actually call out things when the government was overreaching. No more. They are given over. So you do not hear about some of the data that is coming out about how horrible these mandates and things like that and locking down were. That is just a taste of what the leftist man-made utopia is. And it keeps going. Because whenever that utopia starts not working out, the only way you can try to make it work out is to become more and more authoritarian. And that, of course, leads to tyranny. But what you see throughout history is that that doesn't work either, because it's not reality. But when the left doesn't care about reality, because it is fueled from an ideology that is from the spiritual world, that is evil. Right? So it doesn't care if things get better. It just wants to continue the chaos and destruction. So rather than stepping back and going, ooh, this didn't work too well, it says, no, we need to double down. So therefore, we need to really start to get control of people. And so when the man-made utopia doesn't work, it starts leading to, okay, how can we control people more? How can we convince them that they need to be controlled? And all of a sudden you start to talk about people not as people, but as groups. We need people not to see themselves as an individual. We need them to see themselves as part of another group. And on the surface, that sounds good. Yeah, I'm proud to be a man. I'm proud to be part of Elgin, right? But then it just keeps breaking down. No, you need to be proud of your skin color. You need to be proud of your gender. And in fact, you need to start identifying first and foremost as part of that group. Now, I recognize there are differences between men and women. There are differences between Black, Hispanic, white. There are subtle differences in all of those cultures, yes. You know what this says? That everyone was created in the image of Almighty God. That is the heart of our identity. That is why individual liberty is important. God didn't go, oh, you know what? Today I'm going to create the black race. Today I'm going to create the white race. No, he created each one of us as individuals with the capacity to be in a relationship with him and to do good or to do evil in this world. We are not identified by the group that we're a part of, but that is a masterful way to gain power. And we have seen that and how we are using that. And it can crop up on both sides, but it is completely taken over what used to be liberal. Liberal people used to be speaking out for individual rights. They would stand up if you did anything that violated that. Now they are completely given in because the left has hijacked what was once liberal. And just a couple of quick examples. Before this last election, the current president was asked about the voting bloc of the black community. And he literally said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. He said that. Now, he's just kind of being funny and people kind of keep that flippantly. That reveals a collectivist group mentality. And by the way, it's one of the most racist things you can say. Are black people not able to have different opinions? Because the color of their skin is more important than how they think? Of course not. That's garbage. It's infiltrated, and it's infiltrating everything. And all of a sudden now we look at things by quotas and what the percentages are. And all of a sudden, this does not lead to benefits. It leads to destruction. A great example, we start focusing on the disproportionate rates of crime between different communities. There are disproportionate rates of crime. Guess what? I look at it, if someone commits a crime, that person committed a crime. That doesn't mean everyone in his community agrees with what he did. But that's not how we look at things. Right? And so now, right now, in the city of Chicago, because we won't wake up, there are hundreds and thousands of young black men that are being killed every year, and no one gives a crap, because if you do it, you're going to have too high of a percentage of black people going to jail. Well, you know what? If someone is shooting someone else, I don't care what color they are. I want to save the life of the person getting shot. And this kind of stuff leads to more people being destroyed that you say that you care about. That is what is happening. And then people start to recognize that. And they start to say, wait, this isn't a good thing. And people will start speaking out. So then, as a leftist government, what must you do? You have to shut them up. So you tell the media, you don't report on what's going on in Chicago. You just report it when this innocent black person gets killed tragically by the cops in an unfair way, which is horrible. Don't talk about this up here. And then you start saying, no, we're going to shut down. We're not going to allow dissent because that weakens our power. That is happening. There are people that are and there are doctors who lost their licenses because they dared to speak up against what the government was saying about COVID. That is happening. It may not have happened to you, so it's no big deal. But it's happening. And listen, the left will not stop until there's been total annihilation. So this will continue unless we stand up and push back against it. And we have to be very specific about it. So then, as we continue to move and the suppression of speech will continue, and it will continue, there's another cornerstone that begins to pop up. So you try to have a man-made utopia. Struggle with that. Well, let's get people thinking about their groups, and that way they'll just kind of let us lead because we elevate their group over another group. That leads, by the way, to demonizing. I mean, is that not happening right now? Obviously, it's happening right now. And guess what? Both sides will start doing it themselves. Right? It is extremely unhealthy because you're not looking at people as an individual, you're looking at them as a group. This is the specific things that have been spewed by the top leader in our country. So when that collectivism, group identity, doesn't work as well as you need to, what do you start doing? You start attacking the building block, the foundation of society, which is the family. Because if you can get these stupid, ignorant parents to quit teaching their kids about God, about goodness, about their individual worth, if you can do that, oh, you've got it made. And so what do we see happening? We see schools starting to teach things that are against what most of us believe. And when I say most, I'm talking about 70% of Americans across political aisles. But schools are starting to put in policies that say, we're not going to tell you what we're teaching your children. They are pushing back against giving that information. They are even having policy says, you know what, we don't have to tell you if your child is going to get an abortion, or maybe that your child now wants to be called a girl whenever he was a boy. We don't have to tell your parents because you know what, you parents, y'all are a problem. And you know what? There are some really bad parents. And there's no way to fix that. This was said in 2021. Guy running for Governor Terry McAuliffe in Virginia. He said this. He says, I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decision. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. That is not a liberal view. That is a leftist view. Thankfully, that governor got defeated. But the damage is already being done. And then, so you attack the family that way. Then you start teaching children that they are in groups of either victims or oppressors. That benefits no one. If you teach someone that they are a victim, you are damning their future. Because then everything they see that goes wrong, they just go, oh, well, see, I'm a victim. I can't do anything about it. And then if you teach people that they are oppressors, you make them feel so bad about themselves that they don't want to speak out at all. We need to be teaching people that they are all individuals, that they all have a responsibility for their future, and that they can succeed, and that life is going to be hard, and there's going to be failures, and there's going to be successes. But that doesn't fit a leftist ideology. It fits a liberal and a conservative one, doesn't fit a leftist one. And so we're starting to see that is not being taught. And then, just in case you haven't destroyed the family by separating parent and child through the education system, well, let's go ahead and just destroy the family structure itself. And it starts with simple things like, well, maybe marriage isn't just between a man and a woman. And people say, well, if people want to get married, okay, it's free. But that's not what the purpose of that was. The purpose was to remove that standard. And now, since like 2008, did you know in 2008 about 6% of Americans supported polygamy? Now it's like 22%. You are rolling down a hill. And so then all of a sudden you move and you start teaching, well, you know what? There are multiple genders. You start teaching your children that. All that does is bring chaos and destruction. That is not coming from the Word of God. The Word of God says He created male and female in whose image? His image. He created them in the image of God, which is precious and beautiful. And there are people who struggle. But there are a lot more who struggle because we're making them struggle. And you see that happening. You see that around. And you see that we have a president who sits down in the White House across from someone who says that they have now become a girl for the last, I think it's less than a year. And is having an interview with them. And they're talking about all this stuff. And they're talking about gender-affirming care for children. And is asked, are you okay with states making laws against that? And he says, no, that's immoral. to make laws against that. Gender affirming care is hormone blockers. It is allowing children under 18 to have mastectomies. It is allowing them to do other horrific things that cannot be changed. And there is no evidence that it is beneficial. It is too new. And we're rushing into it, saying that it's immoral to put brakes on that. And we are deceiving. The left is deceiving the population. In Florida, they passed a bill, and the left went unhinged and called it the Don't Say Gay bill. They couldn't believe it. They were calling it evil and immoral. That bill, and most people believed that that's what the bill said, that you can't talk about anyone being gay in school. That bill, all it said was kindergarten through third grade. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds max. That the school cannot teach them about sexual, gender, and things like that. That's all it said. Fourth grade, bring it on. K through third, no. The vast majority of people believed that it was making it to where you can't even say gay. No. The enemy, the left, is deceiving, and people are believing if you are okay with a kindergartner teaching your child about sex, then you have major problems. And if you are supporting any group that is okay with that, even if you're not, stand before God with that. I am comfortable standing before God with everything that I am saying. And then, when you can't destroy the family that way, you just destroy people. By saying, you know what, family's really not that important. In fact, it's a burden. Inflation wouldn't be that bad for you if you didn't have kids to feed. So you know what? Why not just go get rid of your kid? Why not take them out before they fully enter into this world? And things have moved. A liberal idea was that abortion may be something that we need to do, but it needs to be done on a limited scale, and it needs to be taken seriously, and it does not need to become a form of birth control. That is a liberal idea. No liberal would support third trimester abortions. Now, it's not pro-choice, it is now pro-abortion. We have seen that switch. In 2019, there was a movie called Unplanned. It was given an R rating intentionally to suppress who could see it, because it showed what abortions were actually like. This last week, NPR, National Public Radio, anyone can tune to that, aired on the radio a live abortion of an 11-week-old child. You could hear the machine vacuum turn on. This is being celebrated. It is trying to make abortion just like if you were going in to get your tonsils taken out. That is what that is doing. That is an intentional attacking and trying to make it where abortion is no big deal. That is evil. The left ideology is evil. It has hijacked the liberal thought in this country, and the liberal and conservative had always been united against that ideology and pushing back against it, but now we're not. And we have to start pushing back against it. And I don't care what happens on Tuesday. I do believe that there's going to be a pushback on Tuesday. But the battle is just beginning. And we've seen it before. Look, please, do some history. The leftist ideology is what was behind a guy named Hitler. The leftist ideology, we all know about that one, right? We know how evil that one was. For some reason, we don't talk as much about the leftist ideology of Lenin and Stalin or of Mao. Do you know what those push to utopia, what it led to? At least 100 million people dead. And you don't have to go back and find ancient literature and hope that you can read what's written on a pottery to find out how bad that was. Just go back and look at the newsreels. Why would we be letting that ideology anywhere near who we are? The reason is because that is the tool of the enemy. And I think about when Jesus goes to Caesarea Philippi and he's looking at the literal, what is called the gates of hell. The leftist ideology, it spews the views of hell. And right now, the gates of hell are opened and they are coming at us. But remember what Jesus said? He said the gates of hell will not prevail. But we have to stand up. We have to push against this. Even if that means that you have to vote a different way than you've ever voted before. Because it's changed. And I hate that. It was a lot easier and now brutal, but whenever we could go battle this across the seas. Now we're battling it within our own families, within our own churches, within our own communities. And it's really, really hard. I understand that. But if you want a future for your children, you have to stand up for that now. If y'all want to go ahead and come on up. We are in a difficult place. I do not like having to preach this type of sermon. I hate it. But that's the time that we're in. And by the way, preaching this time of a sermon does nothing to benefit. In fact, it makes it more difficult. There are less people in here than there were whenever I wasn't preaching these things. But this is the time that we are in. And we can make a difference. Go ahead. We can make a difference. But we have to stand up. And we follow a God who stormed the gates of hell before. And he will storm it again. So let us stand and let us put our trust in the great I Am as we battle the evil that is around us.
Amen.